Welcome to the Mike on Much podcast. I'm your host, Mike Veerman. I'm here with my friend and trusted producer, Max Kerman, as well as our pop culture aficionado, Shane Cunningham. Not joining us today is intern Erica.
Oh.
Yeah. But we will be sending her these files to edit, to do her magic on.
We're still putting her to work, for sure.
You know it.
Yeah.
And happy belated birthday to her. She had a birthday on the weekend. So.
Yeah, she partied pretty good. We might put up a video of her partying.
It was pretty epic.
And before we started rolling, Shane said that Erica reminds him of a young Shane.
Of course, she's the exact same.
In what sense? Let our listeners know.
Well, she'll get a little roasty when she's drinking. Then she'll feel bad about it in the morning, and she'll say sorry. And then she'll just do wild things. Like she might. This I'm not sure if this happened, but she might like hop behind a bar and start drinking straight from the tap. I might have done that in my day. Might have.
That is very much a Shane bit.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
She did, in fact, do that. We'll be posting video later on the Mike on Much podcast.
Yeah, she's a real heckler.
Oh, yeah.
And you are, too, when you're drinking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So lots going on, fellas. Today we're going to talk about a few things, and one of those things is last night Max and I went to the Strokes concert. They played Bud Stage. It was the big opening night gala, as let everybody know there was fireworks.
Yeah, all the Champagne boys were there, minus Shane, basically. Why didn't you come?
Well, I didn't want to buy a ticket because with these virtual things, it's always like, he'll always send a message in the group like, all right, guys, ante up. It's time to pay. If you're expecting free tickets, you're not going to get them. And then, of course, I end up buying the ticket. And then, of course, it'll be like, all right, I have 3 like up-close tickets. Who didn't buy tickets? And then he gives them out to those people. And then Mike, who didn't have a ticket, all of a sudden he was there, like, dancing away.
Exactly what you described is what happened to me.
But you knew that was going to happen too, right? Like
it's always in
on
play.
some subconscious level.
But here's the thing: if from my position, you have to be willing not to go to the show. Like, there's a good chance that tickets won't
And you have
pop
to be
up.
willing to pay last minute if you really want to go
Exactly.
to the show.
So yeah, my situation was literally because it was a big weekend. The Raptors played on Sunday night, and Danica and I went. It was great. And then obviously the Strokes show was last night, Monday. And I was like, I knew all the guys got tickets, and people would be going. It was a fun thing. I was like, if I want to go, I'll pop in last minute. So our friend Simon Jane's like, hey, I got some tickets. I'm like, you know what? I might take a single and pop by. It shows at like 8:30 or whatever, or 9 o'clock. The Strokes going on, so I can do all this stuff. Put the baby down.
Are these free tickets or money tickets?
I would have paid for the Simon ticket, but I was in the park with my brother and Dan Hamilton, and I guess they were meeting up with Maxie later. So I kind of let them know that, and then go about my Sunday with the baby and Danica. And then all of a sudden, I got a text from Maxie, and he says, "Do not buy tickets. I got you sorted." Him and Manager Ash actually sorted me out. So I was like, "Sweet." It's like, "Sorry, Simon, I'm not going to take that ticket." And he was like, "Cool." And
But
then
I only reached out to Mike, though, because I had heard that he was about to buy a ticket.
Greg and Dan had told him that.
And if I kind of assumed that you were going to the show. In my mind,
Yeah,
you
a
were
lot of
going
people
with it.
would assume, but concerts are very tricky because I find I get into the cycle of I'll buy a concert ticket, and it's always like a month away, and you're really pumped about it when you buy it. And then the day of the concert, you never want to go. I don't know why it is, but that doesn't happen to you?
No.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, this.
I guess you're playing in the shows.
I'm
I'm like, why did I buy this stupid ticket? And two, I had hung out with Albert Hammond Jr. before. Like, we partied with him at Absinthe, and we like picked him up from the airport. So, and then we went to see their last reunion tour at Madison Square Gardens, with partying with everyone in the best possible scenario.
We went to New York City, Shane and I, and a bunch of our friends.
This was 2009?
Like 10 years ago.
Yeah. Okay.
And that was considered when they were like, oh, they're getting a little old, you know?
Yeah, we went to the first Nostalgia sort of tour in New York City. It was amazing. So yeah, like them at Bud Stage is kind of like, it's not as exciting if you're Shane.
And then knowing you have to wake up at 5 a.m. to come do the podcast on a freezing cold Canadian day in an outdoor concert, I wasn't like super jealous. That being said, I was the most jealous I had ever been watching people do things that I'm not doing on social media.
Yeah, that FOMO going.
And it turned out
more than ever. I was like buzzing about it. Like I was like, fuck.
Yeah, it was a good one. I will say the system of not buying a ticket and waiting for the last minute only works if all your friends kind of buy a ticket.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're reliant on other people not being us.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if everybody was doing the thing where they're kind of lurking around waiting for a free ticket to emerge, then it would be pandemonium once Birchall or me goes, oh, there's an extra ticket. And then it would be hard to suss through. So shout out to the Champagne boys who bought tickets.
Well, and my brother and I, this is what Greg was saying, because he's obviously known to be a little bit cheap, is he was like, fuck, I bought these lawns. And now everybody else is going to have these amazing seats because, you know, he found out that I got sorted by Manager S. I'm like, listen, Greg, you know how these things work. Get your ass in the building and then you'll probably get moved up somewhere sweet. And by the end of the concert, we like underground railroaded all of our friends into the third row.
By the way, I started using that term last night, and is that insensitive?
You know what? I put it in the text, and I was like, maybe I shouldn't. But historically, people know what I'm referring to.
Yeah,
obviously.
but basically
We're
what we
sneaking
did
people
is
in.
there was a bunch of us.
We're saving them from the lawns.
Yeah, that we brought people. Basically, we did the old trick where we handed everybody
movie ticket theater scam.
Yeah, and you gave your ticket to the person going out to the lawns. Those people have the tickets and then they flash them as they go down to the row.
Yeah, everyone knows what we're talking about.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Anyway, it felt very heroic in the moment, though.
It really did.
Yeah, when you're a couple tall boys in and your friends start joining you with like 2 at a time, you're like, we're doing it.
So we had our tickets, and so I go up to the lawns, and I'm like, Jules, I'm like, I've got 2 extra tickets. Come meet me at the spot. He's like, it's okay, man. I'm with 3 guys. And I'm like, I think we can make it happen. I'm like, basically.
Who were the guys?
Oh, it was like I only had 2 tickets, but it was him, Felix, and Psycho.
Oh, okay.
All the other dudes had already managed to sneak down into the good
And
seats.
Julian's so virtuous. He's like, no man left behind.
Well, this is what I said, and I thought about it. I was like, yeah, he is right. And I was like, no, come meet me. I'm like, we're gonna make it happen. And then he was like so grateful, as he was being shepherded in, he was like, thanks, man. And that's exactly what I said. I was like, no man left behind. And then we were all there, just singing along to all the tunes.
Because Sean Dawson did message me that he had an extra ticket.
Yeah.
Oh, so you could have come.
I could have, but the message came at like 10 p.m. So it was almost like a taunt more than anything. He's like, where are you? I got an extra ticket. And then he sent me a video of them rocking out. 13 seconds.
Yeah, but the show was awesome. We all love the Strokes. It was a very important band to us, like in that pivotal
The
time.
most important band, I would say.
At a pivotal time as a young person, when you care the most about music. How old were you in like 2000?
2001.
Yeah,
that's
like
when
high
the
school
first one
kind
came
of
out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and they obviously don't work a ton, but they come back every couple of years and seem to cash in on all the festivals. And it's like, if you're the Strokes, it's a pretty sick life because you don't have to do any real touring. It's not like they like book a tour and are like
Grinding it out,
like, see you, honey, I'll be back in 3 months kind of thing. They're just like, I always think about what it must be to be their manager, to kind of seemingly do no work and just like pick up the phone. It's like, Lollapalooza, Brazil wants us. How much? $1 million. Guys, you guys want to go to Brazil? I put a private jet in the deal. Like, cool. And then that's sort of been their life for like the last.
And there's no expectation
Yeah.
for the stage show to be any good at all.
No,
and
but
even if the show is good, it's actually a detriment to them. They have to look very like they don't really give a shit, right? They just kind of
Well,
stand
at times
there.
last night, I don't think they did. It was sloppy.
Looks like.
This is the best thing about being in the Strokes is that there's moments of brilliance in the show where they sound fucking amazing.
Yeah,
and Julian
really tight.
does something kind of charming, and you're like, this band is on fire. But then part of seeing the Strokes is them being shitty too. So it's like they played a new song, and like
Their new song is horrible, though,
yeah,
right?
well, they played a couple, and the drummer just like is that a synthesizer?
They have a bit. So Fab comes out from behind the drums and he gets on one of those like Brandon Flowers synthesizers. And so he's playing the synth, so there's no one on the drums. And then I guess they have this constructed bit where then Julian, he has a lyric where he's like, and then I played your drums. And then he's supposed to like get on the drums. But I don't, or if there's supposed to be a drum piece, but then Julian jumps behind the kit and he starts playing like along with the guys on the track.
But he's like, if you got behind the drums,
It's completely
Yeah,
out
man,
of
that is
time,
bad.
and it just sounds like somebody fucking around. And then you can tell the bit's falling apart. So then he abandons it.
The song's over.
and he leaves the kit, and the song just kind of falls apart. There was a few parts like that.
Oh, it was awesome. And the best part about it is that like, they're playing opening night of Budweiser, and we know a lot of the people who work for MLSC or Live Nation and Budweiser. It's a big deal for them. It's opening night. The fact they got the Strokes, everybody's feeling really good about it. But the Strokes are not like, if there's like U2 tryhards on one end, the Strokes are on the other end of the spectrum of like kind of not giving a shit. And he goes like, Julian's like, welcome to Budweiser stage. It's a Budweiser revolution.
Who's ready for the Budweiser revolution?
It was so funny. So he's kind of taking the piss out of it. But it was to the delight of all the Budweiser people who were like, he fucking said Budweiser, sick.
Yeah.
Like people were just like, anyway, them just being them was kind of perfect. It was so funny. And they all look great, I think.
They
Even
look pretty hip, man.
Julian's 40.
Yeah,
I mean, they're all about that age,
they
right?
came out like they were dressed like really hip. They all have these wacky sort of New York haircuts. Like
No one's bloated. Everyone's kind of like skinny and
Who's the coolest member? Julian's always looked bloated.
Albert Hammond was dressed the coolest last night. He was wearing like a yellow suit. Like he looked like he was in like a totally different band.
I saw that, yeah.
It kind of works though on stage, right? And then Nikolai, the bass player, was wearing like those like old grandma sunglasses that you have to wear because of your like cataracts. He was wearing these on a dark stage.
Like the Terminator huge ones?
yes.
Right.
And then just like this red coat, like zipped up like a bomber, and then just like playing his
who's
bass.
the other guitarist? Valencia.
Nick Valencia.
I
yeah.
think he's the coolest.
Yeah,
one.
Sean Dawson would say Nick Valencia's the coolest because Sean.
So would
Dawson
Shane
loves him.
Cunningham, yeah.
But he was dressed the weirdest. He almost looked like he was like between him and Julian, because at one point Julian put on like a long coat. They kind of looked like. Do you guys remember when, like in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, when they're the Wild Stallions in the future?
No.
Oh, okay.
I definitely don't remember that.
It's a weird reference, but anyway, yeah. Anyway, I thought they looked really cool.
Actually, Nick was wearing these very baggy khaki
Tapered,
pants.
though.
But no,
I
but rolled up, I think.
Oh, were they rolled up?
Because I go, what's Nick wearing to Sean? And then Sean goes, he's wearing cargo pants.
Yeah, they were very baggy, but he
And I
pulled
thought he
them
was
off.
kidding to
No.
fuck with
No,
me.
no.
It was
He
a
wasn't
weird
wearing a leopard coat, was he?
I don't think so.
That was probably the joke.
Yeah, he was
part.
kind of wearing like a baggy. It was his whole outfit was kind of weird. But at one point too, you'll appreciate this, Shane. There was like a break, and Julian's like, I just want to talk about last night, not the song. He's like, actually last night. So we were in town, and the Raptors were playing.
And it gets a big crowd, big applause.
He goes, so they said we could come to the show and
Come to the game.
Come to the game. He goes, and he starts laughing. He goes, well, Nikolai and Nick were very responsible, and they got there, and they got their courtside seats. He goes, and me and Albert, we took a bit of time. Albert doesn't care about basketball. And I just explained to him, you just have to be there for the last 5 minutes. He goes, so we get there with about 5 minutes left. And
2 minutes to go in the game.
he goes, yeah, 2 minutes to go in the game. He goes, and they wouldn't let us in. He goes, they wouldn't let us in. The guy says, no, it's done. Went to double overtime. He's like explaining it all, blah, blah. And so it's so funny. And he's like, oh, and Fab was there. Fab went to the game too. So I guess three-fifths of the band went. Albert and Julian tried to get in, couldn't get in. Goes to double overtime. He goes, and then today, it's like, I saw Giannis doing an interview at our hotel. And then the whole crowd starts booing. He goes, I said I saw him. I didn't sleep with him.
He was being so loose and funny.
That was when he was at his best. Like, he was
yeah.
very loose. But then as the show went on, at some point, when I don't know if it was a part for stage banter or setup, but he just handed the mic to Albert. And Albert kept trying to give him the mic back. And then Julian gave him the mic again. And Albert's like, I'm not prepared for this. And then he goes, how's everybody feeling? And then everybody starts cheering. And now he's doing the crowd work for Jules, who's gone back to the kit to just have a drink of his water or whatever.
From the way I observed it is that, okay, the Strokes have never had a bigger show in Toronto. It's like they have pulled off this thing where they go away and there's more demand than ever for this band, which every band would love to do. It's not quite the reality for any band but the Strokes and a handful of others. So they're playing like opening night, Budweiser stage. It's sold out. Everybody's so excited to be there despite it being kind of cold. And so it's that moment in the show when Julian ought to stop being the cool guy for literally 4 seconds and just say something kind of earnest and, a little gratitude to the crowd. But he just can't do it. He can't really bring himself to do it. Like I can sense like he kind of wanted to, and then he's like, and then you could see Albert Hammond he'd been to the mic a couple times. He's like, maybe Albert will do it. And then Albert's like, we feeling okay, guys? Like the one thing where he started pandering to the crowd. It was a really funny moment. I was like, man, these guys just don't give a fuck. And I think about the band a lot because they obviously are rich kids from New York. So they come from a place of privilege. And also, their first record when they're like 20 years old ends up being one of the most important records of the generation. So it's like all they've ever really... And they've sort of gone on and have this like legacy where people 20 years later still love their band. So there hasn't been really many like pitfalls in their career.
Yeah.
So all they've known is privilege. Like all they know is like, sure, I'll go to sit courtside at a Raptors game and I'll show up with 2 minutes to go. It's like,
Yeah.
And I just think it must be so interesting. I always think we talk about this a lot when it comes to celebrities. Like when you became famous has a lot to do with like your world outlook. Like if you have been a struggling, comic, but you break it when you're 40, you have all that resentment and baggage from the first, 20 years of adulthood of like struggling. But if you've been famous since a young person, it's kind of gone your way. It's like your reality is a whole other thing.
Yeah, it's hard to fathom.
Yeah.
It's like you kind of need the losses in order to build the character and make you sort of appreciate things. If you just kind of constantly win or aren't really challenged,
Yeah.
it's an interesting place to come from. Not that they probably don't have disappointments and,
Of course.
they've had internal conflict and stuff like that. But to your point, whenever they've wanted to get together and sort of do the summer rounds, it's like there's a massive bag of cash there waiting for them every time they decide to do it.
Did you read the book Meet Me in the Bathroom? Anybody read
I
that
didn't
book?
know about those New York City bands during that time.
I read a bit of it, yeah.
Yeah, it's a book about the scene in New York in like 2001.
It's in the style of that SNL book, right?
Yeah. It's I guess oral history, right? Yeah, and it's with the LCD Sound System, the Strokes, the Ryan Adams.
Also, there was just to wrap up the show. There was also clearly at the end some miscommunication about what they were going to do, and our buddy Jug Mike M. He found the set list, so they killed their second encore. They were supposed to come out and do Juice Box, and you could tell they were basically they would huddle and start to figure out, like, it was very loose. Like, it was like they had their set list, but then it was like they were kind of figuring it out on stage. Would you agree with that?
Oh,
as
yeah,
they
like
went?
between some songs, they sort of like walk over to each other.
They don't really.
So there was an encore and they canceled it?
So they had they do Last Night at the end of the regular set. Then they go off, and the way they kind of went off, and the way that Last Night started, it was kind of like, is this it? Like, are they kind of shutting this thing down? They go off, the lights don't come up. They come out. They do two more songs. They do I think Someday and I can't remember the other one was, and then those are the last two songs. And just before they did that, I think Albert was like, "This is our last song," and they did it. And then they went off, but there was still like a bit of time before the fireworks and all this stuff. So we were like, "Are they coming out for another encore?" And they didn't. But they found Mike M found the set list, and there was supposed to be one last song. They're supposed to come out one last time.
What was the last song?
It was Juice Box.
Oh, Juice Box,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But so who knows why they didn't decide to come back out? But like I said, it was kind of part of the charm of it and what you kind of get. It was the pure Strokes experience. I felt like
Yeah.
So how much would the tickets have cost had you purchased them?
those in our section. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. I have no clue.
Somebody who paid.
Hey, okay, when you played the Bud stage,
Yeah.
Was there more people there for the Strokes or less?
Both were sold out.
Wow. So and do you
Ours
think
did sell out a little faster. Not gonna,
so? Do you think that the Strokes still got paid more than you?
definitely.
They're
Why is
guaranteed.
that,
It's
though?
the way it works, right?
Yeah. Well, one, the tickets were more expensive for the Stroke show. You know, we're a band of the people. We like to keep it a decent clip, and also I think because it's the kickoff to the 25th year of Budweiser stage, I think they probably made them an offer they couldn't refuse. Is my
Right.
guess. Yeah.
So after the show, you guys have to wait around for fireworks?
No, they ended up timing it like really well. So like the show ends, and then like a couple minutes later, as you think that it's like kind of like wrapping up, we're gonna go. All these fireworks start going off to sort of like signal the kickoff of the season. And I will say, congrats to everybody and kudos to everyone that launched the season because it was an awesome night.
It was a great night.
It was
yeah.
amazing, and the Nut was in fine form and really sort of.
Did he bring out like a tray of brews when the fireworks were going out or anything?
Well, I think my brother was saying like he was going to come out and introduce the band and all that. Like, he was
Adam
really
Burchell
the man-
presents the Strokes.
Adam Burchell presents the Strokes at Bud Stage.
Well, it was a fun moment because as you mentioned earlier in the pod, Albert Hammond Jr. did hang out in my apartment one time in 2010, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
This shows how industrious, like how ambitious the Nut is. When he was just like literally like booking shows and DJing at Absinthe and Hamilton in 2008,
Yeah.
during like a downtime for the Strokes or whatever, 2007, I don't even know what it was. He ended up booking Albert Hammond to come up from New York and DJ at Absinthe, and to kill time before the show, he hung out at Max's. Like, you guys all lived together at the Onyx.
Yeah, basically, the Nut picked up Albert Hammond Jr. Were you in the car with him?
No, I was waiting nervously in the apartment.
In the apartment, okay. In my apartment.
Just a bunch of goofball kids.
So basically, the Nut picks up Albert Hammond Jr. from the airport. He flew in from New York. He picks him up in his like kind of beater car. He didn't like rent anything fancy. He drives him. This is Albert Hammond Jr. famously had some drug issues, and he's totally sober now. So Albert Hammond Jr. shows up to my apartment with a small Tim Hortons coffee. It's like 10 o'clock at night. He sort of like hangs out sort of nervously while like how many people were there? Like 10 people?
Everyone's just staring at him. No one's saying anything.
And by the way, this is a small apartment in downtown Hamilton. And we're all kind of making small talk. And then he DJs.
At the apartment. Wow.
No, he goes
Pulls
out
out his little. Yeah.
and then I think he flew out to France the next day to meet his model girlfriend. I think Burchell, not to get into his personal business, like paid him like $1,500 or something. Like, it was not.
No, it was more than that.
How much was it?
It was like, not to get into his personal business, but I believe it was 10 G's.
Oh, really?
And I was like, how is that possible that you guys could still make money? But maybe it is because now 10 G's seems a lot less than it did back then. But
Because you're making that Albert Hammond money now.
Well, once you buy a house, you're like, oh, fuck, this is all bullshit.
That's just to fix my basement,
Yeah.
bro. Yeah, that's why Albert took the gig.
Yeah,
He had to-
that's a shed.
He had a reno. Well, we do need a shed. So yeah. Anyway, I think it sort of speaks to Burchell's ambitions that he would like make that happen in little old Hamilton.
Because according to his Instagram story, he met him at a bowling alley and then approached him.
At Brooklyn, no, I think he met the Strokes manager at a bowling alley in Brooklyn. Brooklyn Bowl is what it's called.
Is that
I think,
how that
I
happened?
think that's how.
Yeah,
he
I
made
think there
them.
was a little
and then he
exaggerating going
reached
on.
out, and that's how he got Albert Hammond to come to Hamilton. I think he also sold Hamilton as Toronto. He's like, come DJ for me at a cool place. Like we're in GTA, like Toronto, but
Hey man, fake it till you make it.
yeah, Albert Hammond shows up. He's like, where the fuck am I? This is not Toronto.
And are they done for shows? So I can't, like, could I go tonight?
No,
I don't know
or-
when they're coming back to Toronto.
No, they're doing. You look at the website. They're doing like 10 dates this summer, maybe.
But not in Toronto.
No, not
Oh,
definitely
okay.
not Toronto. Yeah.
You should have been there. You were the only
know.
thing missing from the old
I
reunion.
know, but Bachelorette was on. It was.
Oh, is that starting up again?
Yeah, I know. They kind of snuck it in there.
Oh shit.
It's very interesting this season. It's all nice guys. That's their angle they're going. No
okay, I want to
villains.
get into that.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it after that.
Also, after the Stroke show, we all ended up getting ushered into like the Amex Lounge, and because obviously Max and the Arkells guys are like alumni, they played Bud Stage, you know, they got special treatment, so they funneled us into like this like VIP section where we had like a dedicated server with open bar, and like Billy Talent, Ben from Billy Talent, the singer, was there.
Jimmy from Metric was hanging.
So it's all these dudes just hanging out, and so like I was having a beer. I was like, man, this is really fun. And this kind of speaks to like when you have a kid, is it's like in the old days, I'd be like, man, we just saw a Stroke show. We're hanging out in this cool spot. It's open bar. But I was like, it was getting close to midnight. The head was starting to nod. I'm like, well, got to pack it up. So I literally did my round, shook everybody's hand, like said bye to Dan, Greg, Simon Jane was there.
So you say the head started to nod. You mean you're starting to sleep
I
while
can
you're
feel
standing?
myself starting to get so tired because I
Okay.
wake up with the baby so
Yeah.
early. So it's just like I don't have my party legs under me anymore. It's just the
Was
reality.
that part
situation.
just for an audience of one of Danica?
What I just said?
Yeah.
Yes. I'm very responsible, honey.
This is like when one of Trump's aide goes on Fox or CNN and just like they're really just trying
Listen,
to.
I could have stayed till 2 drinking open bar, but I chose to come home to you and our child. But it was actually really fun. It was. a
Were
cool
all the
experience.
guys allowed into the secret Arkells area, or only a couple of like six
No, the
wheels?
people who were with us. I mean, a lot of the Champagne boys had to go back to Hamilton, so it was a smaller group. Last thing on the Strokes, the question for you guys, like I like to think that if we do anything in our like professional career, anything that good comes our ways, like we have moments of like real appreciation, and we like look back and we're like, you guys say this all the time. It's like I can't believe like I'm just a kid from Hamilton. Like have this job, like you thank your lucky stars
All the time.
and I can go on and pontificate just about like how lucky I feel about our band and the life I get to live. Do those guys ever have that conversation? Like even in their most intimate moments with their closest friends? Like, and it's also, and I ask because the whole thing is just them not giving a fuck. So them being super earnest, it would be very strange. But like, do you think any of those guys go home to their pals and goes, guys, this is just like, what a life we're living? Or would that be so off-brand or a feeling that they just don't have? Like, what do you think?
I don't know. They're probably because part of growing up is like the dreaming part, right? You're always like, oh, I want to get it, and then once you get it, you're like, I can't believe I got it. But once you get it so young, I feel like you're like, oh, once I get there, it's not as good as you think it would be. So it's like you're more apt to be like, oh, it doesn't really matter. Money doesn't matter. It's
Yeah,
not
oh,
important.
sure.
What's important is family and stuff like that. I would think.
Yeah, well, sometimes I just wonder, like, when I was thinking about, like, when I was looking at them, I'm like, I wonder what they do with their days. Like, they don't have to do a job, you know? So it's like, just go to the bagel shop, and it's like, oh, yeah, I play bass in the Strokes. And, I wonder, even though, like you said, like, money doesn't necessarily matter, I wonder if, to Max's point, do they reflect and be like, man, thank God I'm not, like, I don't have to go to a job, but I don't have to worry about money. Like, it's a pretty amazing position to be in. Or because they've been doing this since they're 20, they don't know what it's like to maybe go to a 9 to 5. So they don't even know, they can't even appreciate the fact that they've avoided that sort of fate.
Yeah. And also the way, like, and this goes for basically every band that's ever existed, it's like none of them are like particularly like great musicians, or like what makes a band is like sort of like the alchemy of personalities, like, you know, playing together, and it's totally worked out in their favor. But like they are one in a million or one in 100 million of bands that like it worked out in exactly the right way. And I don't know, there's definitely another reality for them where everybody is just like working at the guitar store or something like that. I don't know. Yeah.
Strokes.
Strokes.
Great show.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great to be there, and big props to Manager Ash for getting me in last minute.
Yeah.
Guys, what else you want to talk about?
Abortion.
Here on Freedom. Yeah, I mean, this is obviously a hot topic. It's been in the news lately that in Alabama they've I think put forth a bill they want to pass, or did they pass it? Forgive my ignorance.
I think basically they passed it in Alabama, but because that's against what the Supreme Court, like on a federal
It'll have
level,
to go up the chain, and
and
get
people think
overturned.
it'll get struck down, but it's. People are concerned that it's heading in that direction, and things could change because the court is now more conservative with Kavanaugh.
Yeah, which was why that was such a big fight, obviously.
So do we think in general people are happy about this or against it?
Depends who you talk to.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, the reason why I want to bring, I mean, it's fair to say we're all pro-choice. We're all pretty liberal guys in the room. So, like, that part of the discussion I don't think is particularly interesting. But I want to read one thing that I sent to you guys. Basically, I'm always interested in these cultural conversations where there's a divide between people that are conservative and people that are liberal, and how you go about trying to change the hearts and minds of people, especially when you think people are being somewhat closed off, like people who are pro life, who have no interest in kind of finding out why people would want to or need an abortion. And there's a Christian pastor named Dave Barnhart, and this was shared a lot on social media, and I just want to read exactly what he wrote. He said, "The unborn are a convenient group of people to advocate for. They never make demands of you. They are morally uncomplicated, unlike the incarcerated, addicted, or chronically poor. They don't resent your condescension or complain that you're not politically correct, unlike the widows. They don't ask you to question patriarchy, unlike orphans. They don't need money, education, or childcare, unlike aliens. They don't bring all that racial, cultural, and religious baggage that you dislike. They allow you to feel good about yourself without any work at creating or maintaining relationships. And when they are born, you can forget about them because they cease to be unborn. It's almost as if by being born, they have died to you. You can love the unborn and advocate for them without substantially challenging your own wealth, power, or privilege, without reimagining social structures, apologizing, or making reparations to anyone. They are, in short, the perfect people to love if you want to claim you love Jesus, but actually dislike the people who breathe. Prisoners, immigrants, the sick, the poor, widows, orphans, all those groups that are specifically mentioned in the Bible, they all get thrown under the bus for the unborn." Anyway, I know it was a long passage, but I thought it was really powerful because I looked him up, and he's a Southern dude who's a Christian man, and I just like the idea of I think sometimes to really hammer home a good idea, you need to get people from that in group to be the people spreading the message, because to hear a bunch of coastal liberal people of means waving their finger doesn't always do the best job of maybe convincing people in Alabama that they might be on the wrong side of history here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I guess if we're discussing sort of the best way to bring people to your way of thinking.
Yes, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. It's just as a progressive, what's the most pragmatic way for progress?
Well, this is a complicated one, obviously, because people feel very passionately about it, and they're like, is this thing a debatable thing when we're talking about life, if you're going from their point of view? And then also there's the sort of more complicated issue, which is the people that are making this choice about whether or not to ban abortion are all men. There's no women involved in the decision, and it really is sort of it's
all Republican men.
And
there's some Republican women too that also signed it. So it's more of a Republican Democratic thing.
But by and large, it's sort of men making decisions or sort of outlawing something that a lot of people feel women should be able to make that choice for themselves. But it is a very complicated and nuanced subject that where people have all sorts of sort of thoughts on it. And I think that's why it is so passionate. And it's also hard for someone listening to this might be like, well, three dudes are going to sit around and sort of talk about abortion in a way where it's maybe it's not even our choice. Others would argue, well, yes, it is, because it takes a man and a woman to make a baby. And there's many sort of sides to it that do make it nuanced.
Sure, yeah. And by the way, I should have prefaced this by saying, yeah, exactly what you said. That three dudes talking. It's obviously, I think women should have the right to choose. All those, those are obviously. I was more just interested in the idea of shit. How do you get people on side? And I have.
Well, this is a hard one, because I think the people that are pro-life, not pro-choice, I don't know how much you can get them on side, because for them, they feel it's a life or death issue. That there's basically no reasoning there.
Yeah, I heard a good point in the Slate Political Gabfest, which is one of my favorite political podcasts. David Plotz said, basically what's infuriating, because he said, you can offer a good faith argument that these people really truly believe that life starts at conception, and that part comes from, say, a good place, but that coupled with like no interest in the welfare of a child once they're born, and in offering services for young mothers, or
it feels entirely hypocritical.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're not really caring about this whole other part. That's
so they care about life, but not quality of life.
Yeah, exactly. Or sex education, or public schools, like any of those other things. These lawmakers have shown no interest in.
Well, the other issue too is that a lot of people feel this is about control. It's about control over women and women's bodies. So it's like telling people you can't do this or you can do this. And the way I'm tying this in is that because they don't care once the baby's here. You know what I mean? It's like they present like they're like, this is about life and we need to protect the life. But then once the baby's born, they don't give a shit about the baby. So really then it's like, what is it about? Is it about the idea that like, is it as true as them saying, wait, life is when the baby's conceived and that's why we care? Or is it more like, you can't do this and this is why you can't do this and we're in control of your body? And I think that's why people that are pro-choice are like, hey, fuck you, don't tell me what to do with my body. Like, I will do this. But it still kind of ignores the greater debate that, like, what is life, and I guess what's the responsibility there?
Yeah, this also ties in. So in Arkel's band van conversation, whenever we're talking about any political matters, I'd say Nick and I, when it comes to like what we want and in a society, is very similar. How we get there is usually the debate. So and the most sort of simple analogy is like the Martin Luther King versus the Malcolm X way of finding progress. And Malcolm X, I don't think he preached violence, but he was more interested in like, we got to do it. We got to like
any means necessary.
Any means necessary. Where Martin Luther King Jr. was a little more inclusive. He said like, everybody's my brother. Like he talked in a more inclusive language. I'd say Nick is more on the Malcolm X side of things. I'm more on the Martin Luther King Jr. side of things. And yeah, and so the question I have to ask myself though is like, at what point is sort of the feel good Martin Luther King, let's put our arm around our enemy, that tactic? When is that just unhelpful, or when is that not getting the point across?
Well, you also, the other thing too is it's like, how long do you wait before you get radical? And sometimes it's too late. By the time you get radical, you're like, oh wait, they've already taken away our rights.
Yeah, we should have got. We needed to put our foot down months ago. Yeah, Jane. Any thoughts?
I was just wondering about condoms.
Okay.
Like, isn't that in
They suck.
No, undoubtedly it doesn't feel as good. Like there's no debate there. But I mean, if you are to use a condom and you're releasing into the condom, is that looked at by these people as
that's part of the debate
in its strictest interpretation?
But should they outlaw those?
It's good. Well, I mean, there's that Monty Python song, like every sperm is sacred, every sperm is good. If a sperm is wasted, God gets quite irate. That's it. Every sperm is. Yeah. Anyway, there's a song all about it, and it's like these Catholic families, and they have like 50 kids and all that, and they sing about sort of how you can't spill your seed if it's not to procreate. But yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Where do we take it then? So is any birth control, you know what I mean, acceptable within like a religious terms or the strictest interpretation of?
Because that's the next step, right? After that, and then JOing's illegal.
First they came for the garbage cans.
Then the pull-out method,
Yeah.
Which comes first, JOing?
It's a slippery slope.
Okay, yeah.
I think
Listen, when we talk about getting radical, the minute they start to talk about taking away JOing, I'm the Malcolm X of that one. We needed to get radical 6 months ago. Yeah, our hands are all in cages.
But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yes. So anyway, not to be flip about it because it's a heavy topic.
It is a heavy topic.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, there's some members of Parliament in Ontario, the Conservative Party. There's a young guy who's so fucking hateable. He's this dude from, I think, St. Catharines. He's got a long last name that I can't pronounce.
Yeah, he was like one of the youngest to be.
Yeah, he's like
elected.
21 years old,
Yeah,
but he's super conservative. And he said something about like, we're going to make abortion unfathomable by the time, in my lifetime or something. And yeah, so there's definitely a concern in Canada that, things might head that direction.
We lean so liberal in this country.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm not being radical. Maybe it's like I'm not seeing the warning signs.
Yeah,
right
I
away.
mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the last thing I'll say is, isn't it interesting? Isn't it crazy how, are you guys Handmaid's Tale fans?
I've seen the first season.
so the outfit that
Yeah.
the handmaid's outfit that is showing up at all these demonstrations. Basically, it's like by people who are protesting this thing. And it must be so interesting for Margaret Atwood, who's been a pretty acclaimed, respected author for decades now. This far into her career, she's never been more relevant. You know what I mean? Like, just because that show is so popular and it speaks to the time we're living in, that, you know, she's, I think, what, in her late 70s?
Yeah, well, and she wrote that book, and it turned out to be a bit prescient. Like, we're
And she
actually
wrote that in
heading
the
that
80s
way.
too.
Yeah.
That book, if you didn't know that, I was shocked when I heard that book is not a new book. That
Well, the
book
80s
came
was
out-
also a very conservative decade. Like
Yeah.
Reagan and sort of like, you know, the war on drugs and all. I mean, maybe that's what she was seeing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
It was
projecting out.
Yeah, quite profound. But yeah, it's just kind of crazy how like that piece of pop culture, whenever you see it show up in a real life rally for something that's really important, you just go, wow, the impact of that show is pretty incredible.
I feel like maybe North America is very like, I don't know why I went so high pitched there.
I liked it.
Maybe North America is.
Imagine your voice never went back to normal again.
Oh no, guys! I don't know if I can keep this podcast. So I wonder if like conservatism, like liberalism, if it ebbs and flows, right? Because it's like in North America, it's like obviously things were very conservative, like basically coming. I mean, the 20s were a little bit more roaring, you know what I mean? And then it's basically kind of conservative. Like there's war. We've never lived in a time of war, and there hasn't really been a time.
Well,
of
people
war.
would say that like the Iraq War's been
Sure,
around,
but come on. Like, I think that's something that affects us. Like, the suburbs have thrived for the last 70 years
Sure.
in North America. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's like the 60s, obviously there's counterculture and the hippies and things became like sort of there's a counterculture to it was a sort of like in response to the 50s and early 60s, right? And then that kind of goes through the 70s, which are loose. Then the 80s become sort of conservative again. The 90s get loose again with like sort of like grunge and Bill Clinton and all this stuff, and it kind of perfect. And then the 2000s are kind of like we don't really know what they are. And now we're kind of
Strokes.
Strokes, baby. I just want to listen to some music.
Is
man.
this it?
Yeah, exactly. It's like this existential crisis.
Yeah.
That's how we'd had it good for so long. We started contemplating sort of the meaning of our life, which is how you know you're like in a good period of history because you don't have to worry about eating or feeding your family. But now we're kind of in this weird battleground, and Trump has sort of exasperated it, where it's like, there's such a vocal sort of a loud group on the left and such a loud group on the right, and it's like they're both battling for the sort of direction of, I think, like North American pop culture, like our politics, all that stuff. I just wonder if we're going to sort of continue to ebb and flow. Like, are we going to come out of this into a super liberal area, or is it like, do they just sort of do they coexist going forward in this weird sort of like push and pull?
Yeah, technology's made things weird too.
It has.
Yeah, and like the way news is disseminated, because before there was just like 3 networks basically where everybody got the same information. Now everybody lives in their own little bubbles, and
well, they
and
can't
there's
control
echo
the message.
chambers.
No one can control the message anymore.
No. Yeah. So yeah, people I think are concerned that we are becoming more and more partisan and more divided as a result, because people just hear what they want to hear, and obviously there's a lot of research on how tech companies like Facebook and Twitter, it's like they feed you stuff that is negative and that it will make you click, and that fucks up your emotions in a different kind of way, and the way you see the world.
Yeah. I just wonder what that means for the collective, how we go forward. Because in the past, it's like, oh, someone that's like liberal and someone that's conservative can live in the same neighborhood and go and play hockey together, and they can agree to disagree. It's become so polarized now. Are we just going to sort of like find our crews, our groups, our like-minded people, and sort of like build our own communities, which is kind of already happening. But how does that look along like provincial lines, city lines, state lines? Like, is there going to be like?
Well, I mean, you think about the states, and you're like, sounds like it should be 2 different countries,
right?
It should be like the blue states and the red states, and they should just be different countries altogether.
And
they seem to want very different things.
Yeah, and they want to be governed in a different way.
Yeah.
They want social programs in a different way, and it's like, I wonder if it'll ever split off into like, this is how we operate and this is how they operate, or if everyone's going to still try to be,
Quebec tried to do that to us back in the day.
They did.
That's true.
That was a close vote.
Yeah, they seem to be okay now. The French.
Speaking, yeah. I mean, it's all worked out. They're still Canadian.
Yeah,
It's
I'm
nice.
happy for that. I love going to Quebec. I'm glad they're part of Canada.
I'm glad I don't need my passport to go into Quebec,
I
the
know.
province of Quebec. Yeah, and then, I mean, when you do vote to leave, when you do have a sort of a referendum such as Brexit, that thing's been a complete disaster,
Oh my God, yeah, has it ever? Hey, this is a question for our listeners out there.
If you're still even
If
listening.
you're still listening, I know it's how far.
Oh shit, Mike's on one. He's a little hungover from the strokes.
Do we sound intelligent talking about stuff like abortion, or should we just shut the fuck up? Because this is something that we would actually talk about at a bar. But is the premise of 3 white dudes talking about it, is that useful at all? Anyway, you let us know if this was a useful conversation and we should continue to talk about serious matters, or we should just talk about the season finale.
We're kind of saying the women should decide, right?
No, yeah,
Aren't
we did. Yeah, we did.
We're supporting them, so I would think that it's good to speak up if you're one of the men.
Sure,
on the good
we're
side.
allies in that sense.
I think Shane summed up sort of the position perfectly a couple episodes ago, where it's like, we're not experts on anything. We're just 3 guys talking the way we would talk in a bar. It's just we're deciding to hold a
But
microphone.
does it annoy people, do you think? That
It annoys me,
certain
though.
Subject matter? What?
It annoys me when they're like, "Oh, 3 white guys talking about it." I think it's better to have 3 white guys talking about it in a way that's positive, because then it's creating good role models for people hearing white guys actually supporting things that are on the women's side.
Sure.
And it'd be easier for us to just come on and make like Game of Thrones boob jokes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes
Well, and
that's
it's
more
like,
fun.
why can't we be in the conversation? Why can't everyone be in the conversation? Like,
Yeah.
this is a podcast. Start your own podcast and start talking about it if you're a woman. Like, honestly, it's
I agree.
easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, if you have any thoughts on that, you can tweet at us or let
Hit
know.
us up.
Hit us up. We love. By the way, listeners, we love hearing things you like or dislike about the show. So keep at it.
So, Max, you sort of beautifully segued into Game of Thrones there, but then we stepped on it.
I know,
But it was a
guys.
nice segue.
Thank you.
So Game of Thrones just wrapped up. If you've listened to us, you do know that I am a huge Game of Thrones fan. I started reading the books in 2006 or 7, long before there was ever a TV show. Shane has just come to the Game of Thrones because his wife watches it. So you've watched this last season, but nothing before that.
I've only seen 2 episodes this season.
Oh, okay. So you're just sort of popping in and out. Did you watch the finale?
Mostly out. No, I was doing something downstairs, which may be illegal soon. No, I'm kidding. No, I was gonna say I came back up, but I walked up the stairs and then I kind of tried to watch it and then I fell asleep.
What is in your basement? What were you doing in your basement?
I was editing this Family Tree podcast.
Oh.
If you must know. I started my own podcast like I'm suggesting all the women out there do.
So the series finale aired on Sunday night. We like I said, we went to the Raptors game where they won, so it's 2-1 in that series. And then I went home and I opened my laptop and I threw on Crave and I watched the series finale, sort of this thing that I've been invested in for more than a decade, come to an end.
Have you read the books?
Oh yeah, I read the books before it was ever even a TV show.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I said
So
that
this
while
is
you were
a
out
meaningful
getting that.
series.
Manager Ash brought Max some of these egg things from Starbucks.
Yeah, I was really hungry.
While Shane and I were just talking, he actually left the room, went and got his egg bites, and came back, and he's like, "Did you read the books?" I'm like, I
Sorry.
just said that.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I guess the reason we're going to talk about this is because collectively it seems everybody is extremely disappointed in the way it ended.
But did the books finish? Like, what's the story there? There's some issue, right?
So basically, he started this epic fantasy series in the early 90s. He's plotted all these books, and there's 2 left to be written.
He just hasn't got around to it yet.
No, and the shows, they roughly every season covers 1 book. That's kind of how the show is plotted out. So when they started the show, they're like, well, by the time we get to, because he'd already had all the books sort of up until these last 2, like by the time we get to season 5, he'll have his shit together. Like he'll have written book 6 and hopefully 7. He did not do that. And that's a big point of contention for a lot of
How
fans.
old is it? What's his name again?
George R.R. Martin.
Is he kind of a wacky dude? What's his
Yeah,
deal?
he's like a wacky like fantasy writer.
And he started chirping in and throwing shade to get off the fact that he hasn't finished these books.
Yeah.
He's like, "Oh, they're the Avengers did it pretty well, but this show is not doing too good." Like he alluded to the fact that Game of Thrones isn't wrapping things up as good as Avengers did.
Yeah, so he told these runners, Benioff and Weiss, how the show or how the books end, but he didn't tell them how it got there.
kind of funny.
He's like, this is what happens in the end, but he didn't tell them how they got there. So then, essentially, if his books weren't done by the time season 5 was done, they had to figure out how to get there on their own. This is where all the fans have an issue. So there's 2. There's the book readers that are like, oh, these guys don't understand what this show is about and what makes it special, or these books are about and what makes them special. And then there's like the TV fans that never read the books, and they're like, the quality of the show seems kind of whack. And it's like, well, it's directly tied to the fact that they had a roadmap of this rich source material, and then all of a sudden they were on their own, and you're like, oh, they're just a couple TV guys. When you don't have the sort of the amazing tapestry of George R. R. Martin's work, they just became like kind of like characters were surviving because of plot mechanism. Like it wasn't, nothing happened that really made sense as far as character motivation. They started like messing with things in a way that people were just like, what happened to this show? That's sort of the disappointment.
But don't you think he should have completed it?
Oh, yeah.
Or shut up and not complain about it?
He's actually largely been good about not. He doesn't attack this show publicly, but what Shane's referring to is he posted a blog about Avengers Endgame and how they served every character perfectly in such a big battle with so many characters, and it felt like a complete like.
He was obviously being passive aggressive,
Absolutely.
which is worse than being direct.
Totally. But then the series finale aired, and people were very disappointed.
Are you one of those people?
I laughed out loud twice at the finale.
Like how ridiculous it was?
At two things that happened that honestly, like, that's not the reaction you
Well,
want.
at one point they had a bit of a funny part, which I wasn't expecting. They were doing a vote, and the guy's like, wait, why are we just ourselves voting? We should open it up to the people and have them vote. And then I went to Alex, I go, watch, they're going to start all laughing. I said that as a joke.
Yeah.
And then they all start laughing. And he's like, why don't we let my horse vote?
Yeah.
And it was kind of a sillier part than I thought that show was about. Was that one of the parts you laughed at?
No, I laughed at stuff where it was like, it's like, I think, I don't want to give away spoilers, but basically there's certain things that Tyrion suggested, and then it's like, wait, what are they doing? And it's like, why doesn't Grey Worm just kill this? Like, choices were made and you go, oh, this is because they just needed to have this scene in order to wrap things up. Like, everything feels like it's in service to the plot and not necessarily why a character would do something. And it's like, so I just would laugh out loud at like a suggestion of what they should maybe do going forward. And I'm like, what? And they're like, somebody would die. And I'd be like, what? You know, at one point, I will say this, a dragon melts the Iron Throne. So,
I saw that part.
So Game of Thrones is literally about the claim to this Iron Throne and how important it is, and, you know, you want to rule all of Westeros. And the dragon melts it in some, like, metaphorical show of, like, we need to burn down, you know, the patriarchy and the idea of one ruler and all this stuff. But it's like, everyone's been making fun. Like, is the dragon get nuance? Was the dragon making a metaphorical sort of decision, like, to melt that throne? Like, what was its motivation? Like, and so when I think about the showrunners, I think they're like, yo, this scene is going to blow people's minds.
How smart are dragons in the show? Are they like
the
dolphin intelligence?
They've never explained it. There's never, like, no. Like, for all we know, they're sort of like the intelligence of, like, they sort of seem to be, like, intuitively tied to Daenerys, the mother of dragons. And that's sort of what helps their motivations.
That's the one making out with her nephew, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
But when that happened, like, I know nothing about the show, but when he went in for the smooch, I was like, he's going to stab her. And then he did.
Oh, jeez, there's a
Oh,
spoiler.
come on. At this point, spoiler, you watch that show when it comes out.
I agree.
If 8 hours after you haven't seen it, that's your problem. Do not be listening to a podcast.
Fair enough. Okay, let's get off the specifics because a lot of people don't care. Here's this. Do fans have a right to be disappointed on this level? And I saw a tweet from Jason Alexander, who plays George Costanza on Seinfeld, and he's like, listen, to the runners of the show, I know a thing or two about disappointing series finales. He's like, I think you did a wonderful job. And for the fans, let's just focus on the joy that it brought us.
Yeah.
Something like that.
George isn't getting upset.
Well,
No.
What's interesting about this particular one is this the first time this situation has happened where basically a show is based on books. The show becomes a massive juggernaut, like the biggest show in the history of television, and then the book isn't finished. Just the situation at hand. It's like, it's one thing to like write a shitty finale, like the Seinfeld example. Like there's lots, or it was people hated the Dexter finale. Yeah. People hated the Lost finale. Yeah. This has happened many times over. What makes this situation unique is just like the fact that the guy who created the whole world just never finished it.
No, he didn't do his homework. Like, he didn't finish the assignment on time, and now we're all suffering for it.
So, okay, better question. Who's more responsible, Georgie Boy or David Benioff? Like, who's the show creator?
Yeah.
Who's more responsible for fucking up this finale?
I'm going to put it on Benioff and Weiss only because they get, like, they've won all these Emmys. They're basically accolade. My brother was telling me, so they got the next Star Wars movie. And my brother was saying that because of the reaction to this last season, they might lose the Star Wars movie now.
Come on, that can't happen, really?
Alex told me that's why they rushed this season.
Yeah.
To get to the Star Wars thing. So isn't that ironic?
So this is the big knock on them, is that everyone, like, basically HBO said, you can run it for as many seasons as you want, have as many episodes, like, the bank is open, whatever you need to spend on these. And they're like, let's wrap it up in 2 seasons, and we're going to do shortened seasons. And so everyone's like, these assholes, instead of giving the keys to somebody else who loved the show and would have, like, nurtured it, the theory is, I don't know if they're assholes, but this is what people say. They were like, well, no, it's ours. We want to keep our ball and go home. So they truncated the last 2 seasons. Wow. They've rushed everything because they want to get out and start doing other stuff. But it's like, that's fine. Go do your Star Wars movie, but hand it off. But they didn't want to hand it off.
Is George still going to finish the books now?
George R.R. Martin claims he's going to finish the books, but people are concerned because he's a little older. He's maybe not in the best shape. And he makes people furious because he's a huge New York Jets fan. Like he loves the New York Jets. It's funny because he's like this old like kind of
Where's he
like
from?
fantasy writer.
Is he
he's
American?
an American, yeah.
American? Okay.
So he's just like, all my dragons and the magic and all that. But then he loves the New York Jets. So on his blog, he'll post about the Jets. Like, I can't believe the Jets just drafted this guy or whatever.
People are like, write the fucking book.
That's all the comments. And then he had to address people. He's like, I'm allowed to have a life outside of these books. So I like the New York Jets. Okay, let me do that. But it's literally been a decade since he's fucking released a book. It's ridiculous. Like, and it bothers me that I'm even caught up in this whole thing. Like, I wish I never cracked one of those books, man.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
But it makes people furious.
David, by the way, I don't know anything about Game of Thrones. Don't really care about Game of Thrones. But David Benioff wrote one of my favorite novels. So he's a bit of a novelist himself. City of Thieves. He wrote that book. And he also wrote The 25th Hour, starring Ed Norton.
I love that movie.
Did you know that? He's also married to Amanda Peet.
Yeah, I knew that.
Whoa.
Yeah. So shouts to David Benioff, man.
You might be the only person right now giving him shouts. You're really going against the grain.
I find he's an impressive career. 2 like amazing novels and doing Star Wars. Sweet.
I don't know if he's going to be doing Star Wars, but yeah. So anyway, but I mean, it is interesting that people get so disappointed. I guess it's a hallmark of how wonderful you put something truly great in the world if people care enough to sign a petition and
the last season is the hardest thing because part of the show, what makes it good is it's just shocking. Out of nowhere, a main character will just die, or a bunch of main characters will just die, right?
But here's the thing. It's ostensibly shocking, but when you go back, you realize they spent 10 episodes laying the groundwork.
Right.
Yeah, I think
They had the shocking.
But I mean, when you only have 6 to wrap everything up, how are you possibly going to make that good? And anything that happens, you're like, oh well, the clock was winding down. These people had to die. So when the dragon's like burning the world to a crisp, it's pretty expected because that's what they have to do.
Yeah, but that's the problem. Is it's like it's a construct outside of the storytelling. It's like, oh, they realized they had to wrap it up quick. So Daenerys Targaryen, she became the Mad Queen literally overnight. It's like she's this beloved character. They set her up to be the hero.
But wasn't it leading up to that a little bit?
But there's the thing. If they'd actually done like an extended series, you can show her slowly falling apart and what that does to the relationship with her and Jon and all this stuff. Like this whole season, Jon, they revealed that his parent, he had this lineage and that he was like the heir to the throne. It meant nothing. Like, why would you build up for 6 seasons? And it's because they just had to rush through it. Whereas if they had more time, you can explore the nuance of that. You can see her start to go crazy. You can see her start to get jealous. And you believe it more than just all of a sudden it's like, cuckoo! And she's like...
It's like, that was an odd sound effect they threw.
She's on the dragon. She's going to go burn the city.
And they gave her that ridiculous makeup that made her look like crazy.
They took her one braid out.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, she's a crazy lady now. It's like, you remember Me, Myself, and Irene? Whenever he would turn into Hank, that weird drums would come on.
Oh, yeah. In the slow motion. Yeah.
It's like that happens, and then she burns the city to the ground. Anyway, it was disappointing. Do you think that it's ridiculous for fans to be this upset?
No.
Because that's the point of fandom.
Yeah.
They care.
And I think part of the reason they're upset, too, is that it's over.
I agree.
And now they don't have anything, It's like when you break up with a girlfriend or something. They're like, I hated you anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you take away their thrones and soon masturbation will be illegal. What do these people have left?
Mike on Much can be found on Twitter and Instagram at Mike on Much. You can subscribe to the show on any platform that has podcasts. Spotify, do it.